Welcome back to He's a Giant, a pod about all things college football and all things Giants football. Back after a 2-week mental health break from the ridiculous amount of draft talk we've been having. Apologies for last week. We had some stuff going on, but we are back and we have another special episode for you guys. I'm your host, Sal, with my co-host Monty, and our friend here, kind enough to join us again. Those you guys should know him by now. KSI, what's going on, brother?
Not much. It's officially draft month, so a little bit excited, a little bit, it's going to be a long month. It's going to be a very long month, and so we're just kind of raring to get at it now.
Absolutely. Let's see. I think there's some people still filtering in here, but so for those who are here, Monty, you may want to push it out again if possible. But for those who are here, we are going to use this episode to go through our big boards. So Monty and I created our own big board. We stopped at 50. We wanted to kind of hone in on those specific players. For those who follow Giants draft content, you guys know that KSI does his own draft board every year. It's probably the best Giants draft board I've seen. And he was kind enough to share it and unveil it with us today. So we're going to go through both draft boards, compare the two, and give you guys a feel for the differences between not just the individual boards, but this particular class versus historical draft classes that we've been looking at, which I think everybody who's done the draft board realizes. If you've been watching our show, you realize this is a special draft class. So with that, we are going to kick it off. We want to make should we make the announcement now, or people are still filtering in? But might as well just say it. So we do have a special episode for you guys next week as well. Matt Waldman, for those of you who don't know, one of the best prospect evaluators out there, independent evaluator. He does not look at anybody else's consensus boards or their rankings. He just puts himself into a cocoon and reviews just 4 positions. He reviews quarterbacks, wide receivers, running backs, and tight ends, does a deep dive into all these guys through our college football, and comes out with his own RSP guide every year. He just released it. Matt Waldman's one of the best in the game. Matt has kindly agreed to join us on our show next Thursday. So we're going to have a special episode with Matt. It's going to be awesome. So those of you who are nuts about this stuff, you're going to love Waldman next week.
What a great get. What an absolutely amazing get. Even if you spend just a little bit of time, he sends out small little videos on Twitter. Every single one's worth a watch. He's such a brilliant mind.
He's so good. When you watch Waldman do his film breakdowns, the best part is you hear his old school clicker as he goes through the film. He's great, man. But what I love about him is that he's truly independent. He does not look at other people's evaluations. He just looks at players, and when you hear him talk about guys, he's just telling you what he saw. It's the most objective way to hear or listen to anybody talk about a player, because he's just saying, hey, this is what I saw. These are things I look for. We're going to try to get some really good info from him. We're going to try to ask him about how he goes through the process, but we're looking forward to next week's episode with Waldman. But that is not to belittle what we got today with KSI. So why don't we get started with our big board reveal? So which one are we doing first, Monty? Why don't you start it off?
We're going to do KSI's first, so let me pull it up. But yeah, no, Waldman is a great get. He is somebody who is so good at explaining and talking about the game so well that anybody can understand. So, I encourage everybody to go check him out and tune in next week. But with that said, I think this is, let's see. Hang on. I just want to make sure I have the right one up from KSI. Okay, this is the right one. All right, so pull it up. Hang on. It's not. Try this again. Where is it? Sorry about that. Here it is. Here it is. Okay. Sorry about that.
Here we go.
All right.
All right. So KSI, why don't you give us kind of a intro into this big board here and kind of just, talk to us a little bit about your process when you go through this. And I know you do this every single year. So why don't you lead us into it?
So my bad. I couldn't really stop at 50. I had to keep going. So the way that I look at things, right, and I think it's important, and everybody knows this, right? But I think it's important to just say, I'm not a scout. None of us are scouts, and especially in a year such as this, where we're heavily considering quarterbacks, we have to be cognizant of the fact that we don't have a lot of what goes into these prospect rankings. We don't have access to medicals, we don't have access to interviews, things like that. That being said, I like to break down what I think of these prospects in clusters. And to have nice little breaks in where I think there is a quote unquote drop or in talent. I try not to let position influence my rankings, but sometimes that might leak through. I can't really help it, and I try and make this as pure of an evaluation as possible, and not so much Giants focused. But sometimes that might leak through as well. I might favor somebody who would be a better fit for us, as opposed to just in general. But that being said, this is my big board, and uh, just one look at it. And anybody who does a big board for this year, and you guys have talked about this, there's a very, very strong slant towards one side of the ball, especially at the top. And more specifically, there's a lot of difficulty, right? When it comes to really, this is what's so tough about doing big boards. You're comparing different positions, and how can you say this guy's a better cornerback, better player as a cornerback than this guy is an offensive tackle? So it's very difficult to do, which is why I like clustering a little bit. And so even though I have, Olu Fashanu at 8 and Jaden Daniels at 9, if you like Jaden Daniels as a better prospect than Olu Fashanu, I'm not gonna really argue that. I will say that I have Joe Alt slightly ahead of Fashanu, so you can make one-to-one comparisons, when it comes to positions. But it's always kind of tough making a vertical big board like this. I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but that's something that I really struggle with.
Yeah, I think we struggled with so the way we did it when we show you ours eventually is that we did individual top 50s, and then
Yeah.
we compared them, and we had a lot of similarities, but where we struggled was ranking them, like in the order,
Yeah.
and a lot of it was like, well, do you take into account things like age or positional value, health, like should they matter? I think those are all questions that to some extent they all matter in my opinion, because you're trying to create a board that is supposed to replicate what a draft board would look like when you're trying to make decisions on draft day, right? So I think we took we took it into account, but I don't know how you went about it. I mean, did you just kind of ignore those things?
I tried to be as objective and plain as I possibly could. So are we just diving in on some of these guys?
Yeah, well, why don't you start by telling these guys, who are our viewers, how you broke down the color coding to understand how you
Yeah.
break up these groups.
So blue is basically a top 10 grade, and it would be a top 10 grade in any draft class. Blue for blue chip. You guys will hear, a lot of talking heads say, teams don't have 32 first round caliber players, and it would be an incredible draft if you had 32 true first round talents. For me, I had about 20 this year, which, if we want to compare to last year, I think I had 16 or 17 last year. So a little bit better, a little bit, higher at the top for me. And these are, players that I would think would be first round caliber players in any draft class, if you want to extrapolate to other draft classes. The The rest is a little bit more self-explanatory. First to second round, guys that are kind of in that middle ground. I could see them going in the first round, second round. Orange and pink, I guess, would be kind of my day 2 guys that I think should be solidly, day 2 players. And then early day 3 and day 3 would be guys that I would be very, very comfortable with, in the 4th or 5th round. I don't think that I've watched too many other players, that I think are going to be more priority free agents or things like that. But this is kind of how I broke it down. And so I think that this is a good draft class overall. I think really, really strong at the top. But I do think that, when we're looking at some guys maybe later on in day 3, it may not, I feel like it peters out a little bit compared to some other draft classes.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah, so I mean, we appreciate you going out with the full 100 here. Sal and I did 50 for this one, but I'll go ahead and I'll pull ours up. That way we can kind of explain our process for ours, and then we can just kind of compare, some of our differences and kind of talk all that stuff through.
100%.
So let's see. So we did ours similarly as far as like tiers and things like that. But all right. So you'll see this is ours right here.
You have to zoom in a lot for the viewers to be able to see it.
Yeah.
And we'll tweet these out, guys. Like I'm assuming KSI, you're going to tweet yours out later, right? Or
Yeah.
And we'll do the same, and we'll link it to the link to the pod. But,
so basically, like Sal was saying already, the way we did this is Sal and I both did our own individual 50 to kind of go through this, and then we came together and. I do think like we acknowledge some of the injury and stuff like that. Like for that, I threw some of these right here with these red like medical flags on guys. I know when I did, I tried to like not put in positional value or injury too much, but at the same time, it does play some role. It was hard to totally ignore that altogether. That with age and all that type of stuff, it matters to an extent, but I tried to not go overboard with it. But yeah, I know when Sal and I kind of combined this, we would try to take guys that we both had in a certain area. If those guys were there, that was pretty easy. We both put them up there, and there was a lot of it. But some we were kind of far apart on, so we would kind of talk it through. See if like one of us was too high, one of us was too low, and if not, we kind of tried to find a way to meet in the middle on that. And we had 7 guys each that were not in my top 50, that were in Sal's top 50, and then there were 7 guys that were in my top 50 that wasn't in Sal's top 50.
You're gonna have to zoom in quite a bit because I don't think anybody can see it. So I don't know if you're able to. Yeah, there you go. Maybe a little more. There you go. All right. Hopefully that's better. Let us know, guys.
Yeah. Let's see. But I think it was good for this where I went through this and I put your rank in here, KSI, and then I had the kind of the difference here between all of our rankings. So, we did the same way where our first one was blue chip, and we had a lot of similar. Sal and I were a little bit different on Olufashanu. He was a guy I didn't originally have I had him right outside my blue chip, and Sal had him on there. But Sal was pretty high in Olu, so we compromised on having him right at the end there. But I'm going to try to go through this, and maybe good way to do this is just kind of see where each of us had these guys and kind of go through it from there, and like some of these bigger differences. So Jared Verse you had at 19. Do you want to tell us some of your thoughts about Jared Verse?
Yeah, absolutely. So while I have him at 19, I still have him as a pretty solid first round grade. In terms of edge prospects, I only have Dallas Turner and Laiatu Latu ahead of Verse. And throughout this process, it's been kind of those three in one tier for me. As far as Turner goes, I think the reason why I put him over Verse is the juice that he creates at the snap, the speed, the first step, quickness. I think is a higher percentage in terms of being translatable to the next level, and so that's why barely, between Latu and Turner, I had them basically equivalent. I gave quote unquote the nod to Turner because of Latu's medicals, but Latu I think is probably the most polished, pass rusher in the draft. I think in terms of diversity of moveset, I think in terms of um, the counters that he can produce, along with above average strength. I think that he's such a phenomenal prospect. He had that neck injury, which is always, we know Giants fans know about neck injuries, right? And so that does scare me a little bit. Verse, I think, probably has the best speed to power, but I think he had a lack of production this year, and I think that's because I think he needs to develop a little bit in terms of finishing. And so that's the only reason why I put him, a little bit lower than Latu and Turner. Uh, but it's not by much. I think I had all three as a solid first round grade. But that's my thoughts on it.
Yeah. Monty, why don't we go to the top of our board and just kind of review it real quick so people can see, so we had 8 blue chips. And we actually our top prospect in the class, as you guys can see, is Marvin Harrison Jr. And I think, most people you talk to, you're going to either come away with it being Caleb Williams or Marvin Harrison Jr. Like it's,
Right.
and I think we kind of debated who it should be, but pound for pound, I think for what he does at his position, Marvin Harrison is as close to a perfect prospect in this class as there is. There are very few deficiencies in his game. Had him number one because he can pretty much go up and get the ball and do anything you can ask a wide receiver to do. He produced at a Bolitnikov level. You can argue whether or not he should have won it this year, but he won it. And he did that with really terrible quarterback play and had an enormously productive season again while being double and triple teamed. I think he's the surest fire bet to be a highly productive NFL player in this class. I think that he's your best bet. So we had him one, but we did debate the Caleb thing. Then again, I think similarly we had Caleb. You don't have to go through all these names. Everybody knows who they are by now. Caleb, Malik Neighbors, Brock Bowers for sure. We do have Drake May in there. I know you didn't, and a lot of people have dropped him out. I think we view Drake May as somebody who is a blue chip prospect just in terms of raw talent. And
Yeah.
the ability to project as a potential top 5 NFL quarterback if he hits his stride. Understanding that there's a floor.
Yeah, I factored in risk. That's the difference.
That's
I
fair.
factored in risk. I don't think Drake is a perfect prospect. I think he is in a tier unto himself. I think it's Caleb, then drop, then Drake, and then drop, and then
Agreed.
the rest of the prospects.
Mhm.
But I do think there's an element of risk. He has some accuracy issue. He's had misses, and that's the one thing that concerns me about him. Obviously, doesn't concern me, enough to not put him 6th, right? I think I had him 6th, and you guys had him 5th, right? But
Right.
that is kind of where I think when I think of blue chip like top 5, I'm like really minimal risk, so high floor, high ceiling, and I just think his floor is a little bit lower than some of the guys that I put as blue chips.
Well, that's fair. I think we view him the same. We just kind of classified him a
Yeah.
little bit differently.
Yeah.
And then I think we agreed on a Dunze and Alt. I'll make the case for Fashanu. Coming into this year, Olu Fashanu was considered OT1 in this class. And the reasons for that are that he has an Andrew Thomas-like ability to mirror, move, balance, and take away pass rush at a very elite level. And he does that. The knocks on his game are probably his run blocking, which can use development, but he's a young prospect. Remember, this is a kid who played high school. He played basketball in high school, and he's relatively new to football. So I think the ceiling for Fashanu put it well to your point. His floor is a high end left tackle from a pass blocking perspective, which already makes him a highly valuable prospect. His ceiling is all pro. I think if he can get his run blocking down, which I think he will, I see no reason why he can't. I think a lot of that is technique, coaching, experience. I think Olufashanu could easily be, it wouldn't shock me if years from now we look back at this draft class and think the guy who had the best NFL career out of this entire group was Olufashanu. This is the guy who had like the 15-year NFL career as like a perennial All-Pro left tackle because of his upside. So that's why I classify him there, understanding there's some risk, but I still think he has a higher upside than Joe Alt, like significantly higher than Joe Alt.
Yeah. I don't disagree with a single thing you said. And the only reason I put Alt as a little bit one spot higher than Fashanu is because of the run blocking. I think Alt's right now just a more complete prospect than Fashanu is. But I think Andrew Thomas is a pretty decent comparison to Fashanu, actually. Although I do think Thomas was maybe a little bit better of a run blocker coming out of Georgia. Both, actually, and it's funny. I had Andrew Thomas as my OT1 that year when he was not. And it's because I saw a lot of DeBrickashaw Ferguson in Andrew Thomas. And that's actually, I think, a pretty decent pro comp for Fashanu. Definitely much better as a pass protector. He's kind of like the exact opposite of Talise Fuaga in a sense. Fuaga is just a monster as a run blocker, but like his pass blocking scares the shit out of me.
I don't think he's gonna. Neither of us think he's gonna stick as a tackle in the NFL.
No, I don't think so either. Yeah. I don't think so either. But it's a passing league, and pass protection matters, and that's why Fashanu's up there. Yeah. But I just thought Joe Alt was a little bit more of a complete prospect coming out. But I do agree with the ceiling with Fashanu. I think he probably has the highest ceiling of any offensive tackle prospect in the draft.
Yeah, and I think the one thing which is fair that people bring up with Fashanu is that game versus Ohio State this year. But at the same time, like I feel like with prospects, you kind of a lot of times have to throw away their worst game and throw away their best game. You kind of got to look at everything in the middle there. And I do think, he didn't have a bad year, but he had the only time that you kind of saw a chink in that armor this year, and when he kind of got exposed. But that was it was a one game thing.
Yeah, and it made sense. I forget the name of the Ohio State edge defender that punked him.
Tuapolova.
Tuapolotu. Yeah. He's a power rusher, right? And I think power rushers are going to give Fashanu problems until he can get a little bit stronger. And so I just think it was a bad matchup for him, but one that I think is certainly teachable at the next level. And that's what you're looking for, right? How they're going to project as a pro, not what they did in college. Right. A lot of people have issues with.
Going to the next, we had the same thing. We had a first round grade on the next room, right? So, and we went a little further. We got up to our cutoff was at 28. So we had 28 first round graded players, and maybe we're being a little bit liberal with that, but I think to us that's just a reflection of the quality of the class. I think in general, most classes have 15, 16, 17 guys who are truly first round graded. You had it around a little over about 20, I guess.
20.
Yeah, and I think we're a little higher because we included some guys who we think really do meet. We threw guys in who we think are worthy of it. But the way when we talked it through, and this is our own non-scout, non-professional view of it, a first round graded player to us is a guy who is a perennial starter, a high impact starter, and like a guy who's going to be probably a Pro Bowl caliber player at various times in his career. Or on that edge. So these are all guys, when we looked at them and we tried to project their careers out, we thought every one of these guys on our list, even after the blue chippers, are guys who you can see doing that. And so going quickly through the list, Quinion Mitchell, Jared Verse, Torrey Fontenot, Latu, you talked about Turner. I agree fully. In fact, I wanted Turner higher on the list. Monty pushed him down. But
we were switched a little bit. You were lower on Latu, and I was lower on Turner.
And I was lower on Lato because of the medical risk, and I to just a little bit, right? But
Yeah, and I tried not to factor that in as
yeah,
much.
absolutely. Johnny Newton, JJ McCarthy, Byron Murphy. We, as everybody knows, we have JJ McCarthy a little higher than Jaden Daniels on our list. Murphy, Daniels, Arnold, DeJean, Fuaga, Thomas. Like when you go through the list, we have Penix in this group as well. We had him at 22 overall. And Nate Wiggins, Kool-Aid, Chop, Robinson, Jackson Powers Johnson, Amarius Mims, JC Liam. There's not a name that I mentioned there that we can't see being like perennial starters in the NFL who flirt with Pro Bowls at various times in their career because of their innate ability. And so, yes, it's a little bit of a liberalized use of the first round grade, but I think that just reflects the talent pool we're dealing with, and
Yeah.
that's how we looked at it.
I'll also say another part of that is, when we're combining ours, like both of us had smaller first round grades, but when we're taking both of ours and you kind of now have to set this arbitrary cutoff point, there may be a couple guys that I wouldn't have had a first round grade in that got thrown in there, and there's a couple guys Sal wouldn't have,
Absolutely.
but they get lumped in that same area. You're like, you know what, he can fit there, he could fit there, and we kind of just make it work.
And that's more true to life. When you think about how the Giants are gonna, Joe Shane's gonna make the final call, right? But it's a collaborative process, right? So that's more true to life.
Yeah, it was an interesting experiment to kind of go through the combination here. But yeah, so the talks about some of these guys, where were you on? I know you had some offensive players to kind of start out here. You had right outside the blue chips, you had the two offensive linemen, you had Jaden Daniels. Who are some of how do you feel about the top defenders in this draft? Who do you guys like the most?
Yeah, so I think maybe one of the hotter takes that I'm gonna have is my love for Johnny Newton.
And we're right there with you.
Yeah, I'm not sure that many people like Johnny Newton as much as I do. When I saw him, I saw Jeffrey Simmons from the Tennessee Titans. I think he's a pure 3 technique. It's very difficult for defensive linemen to have a great first step, but then also play with proper leverage. And I thought Newton was able to do that pretty consistently. I believe, and I saw a stat, I think in terms of pass rush win rate, he was at like 17% or something like that.
Insane for a 3 tech,
which is crazy. And I think that he plays with functional gap integrity in the run game. I don't think he's going to be one of these 3 techniques that's going to get blown off the ball, with the double team. I think he can hold his own because I think, again, he can play with good leverage. And when you can have a 3 technique that can give you, meaningful snaps as a run defender, that's a surefire first round pick. Who's the God? I can't. My memory's so bad. I'm forgetting names from last year. But who was the first round pick for Tampa Bay from Pitt?
Kalijah Kancey.
Kalijah Kancey. Very similar, and he was an absolutely disgusting player for Tampa Bay last year, and so he's somebody, if the Giants want to trade down, if they take that Minnesota offer, 11 and 23 or something like that, I think Newton might be in play for them. But I think he's just a very, very strong prospect. I think he would hold up in multiple other draft classes. In terms of other defensive prospects, Quinyon Mitchell and Terrion Arnold is my CB1. I think to begin the year, most people had Kool-Aid McKinstry as the best corner in Alabama, but I think when you look at Arnold's frame, his hips, his ability to just play with physicality as a boundary corner, and he's a good tackler. I think he's somebody. I don't think he or Mitchell. And I think if you told me that Quinyon Mitchell was your CB1, I have no issues with that. I think Quinyon Mitchell is a poor man's Devin Witherspoon, in terms of the stickiness that he plays with as a press man corner. Quinyon Mitchell is a very, very strong press man corner. Obviously tore it up in the Senior Bowl. I don't think that any of these guys sort of match up with the corners that came out last year. I think that they would probably be CB3 or CB4 when it comes to comparing to last year. But I think that for this draft class, I think they are some really, really good, solid starters. Both of them probably better in man cover schemes. There aren't that many great zone corner prospects at the top, at least from what I see.
There's one. There's one, and I think in Wiggins. I can't think of anybody else who's that high in that
Yeah.
on the list.
Maybe
Yeah.
Jajeen. And he's done a lot.
Well, he does it. He does everything.
Yeah.
I guess, yeah.
To some of your thoughts there. Like I said, we're really high on Johnny Newton as well. When we went into our profiling of the prospects this year, it was one of our first reviews because we kind of did it by need, and we didn't think we were going to come into needing a quarterback this year. So, Johnny Newton was somebody very high on our watch list this year. And I think one thing we went into this process what we had to think about is like not just comparing these guys to each other, but comparing them to other people in their position over the last 5 or 6 years. And I think Johnny Newton, I think of what defensive lineman have I liked more than Johnny Newton over the last few years. Like Derek Brown is a guy I can think of, but like not many people really come to my mind who I would have had ranked over Johnny Newton, which kind of really like, that's where I was like, this guy is higher than, people are putting him.
Well, if Johnny Newton plays in the NFL and plays the way he's projected to in the NFL, and he's up for a contract, he's going to make, if he was up for free agency this year, he would make in upwards of $25 million a year as a pass rushing 3-tech with his kind of pass rush ability and 3-down ability as a run stopper. That's about that. That's kind of in that range of guys like Dexter Lawrence. I know it sounds sacrilege to say, but that's what those guys are, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's not a lot of them. So he is a $20+ million a year player. So I think you have to have him high on the list. And D tackles are just more valuable now. People are realizing that
100%.
you can't get by without D tackles who can rush the passer and stay on the field. So I think guys like Jordan Davis, who are basically rotational linemen and not really useful in pass rush, they're no longer looked at as valuable, even though he was just drafted a couple of years ago in the first round. You want these guys who can one gap, who can get to the passer, and guys who can hold their own against double teams in the run game. There's not a lot of them every year. There's like a handful of them at most. This happens to be a deeper class. Yeah.
Every single mock draft, I just have Johnny Newton slotted to the Rams. They got some shoes to fill. I think that's such a good spot for them. For me, it's like Johnny Newton or a quarterback for the Rams, pretty much. That's what I'm thinking for them.
I mean, that's kind of terrifying because the Rams have gone all in on building their team. If they put Newton next to Kobe Turner, that's bad
a good
news.
Young core.
Yeah.
Disgusting.
So that's our, that's kind of our list that went all the way up to 28, which are first round grades. Our first, second round guys, we had, I think, a smaller list than you. We went from 29 to 41, so we had 13 guys on that list. We had the cutoff of J.C. Latham as our final first round graded guy. Neither of us are actually that high on him, but it's hard to keep him out of that grade just because of his raw talent and tools. But we cut it off at Graham Barton, who I actually think is a better player than Latham, but Graham Barton, I think, grades out as a slightly lower prospect just because of upside.
Ceiling. Yeah, exactly.
And so, the guys on this list were Graham Barton, Lad McConkey, Darius Robinson, Troy Franklin, Tyler Guyton, Zach Frazier, A.D. Mitchell, Jordan Morgan, Christian Haynes, Tyler Newman, Xavier Legette, Mikey Sainristil, and Bo Nix. And, the Bo Nix kind of made the list. We had a little bit of debate about that cutoff, but because I think we've consistently viewed Bo Nix as a guy that is a first, second round graded guy. Because, I mean, you could like him, you could hate him, but I think his body of work and what he does well does sort of translate to a guy who is likely to be drafted in that area. And I guess you
Yeah.
could argue he's getting that half round boost as a quarterback. He shouldn't be this high, but we put him in right around there. So that was kind of our cutoff. What do you think about that group in terms of first, second round graders?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have a lot of similar players. My list kind of ends at 32, with Zach Frazier being the last player on the list for me. Um, it's funny. I think this draft is so insanely strong at offensive tackle that is just the vast majority of this area is just offensive linemen tackles. Were
Wide receivers.
tackles that are going to become guards.
Hmm.
So I kind of start off with Talise Fuaga, which might be a little bit more of a hot take because a lot of people have him a lot higher. I think I have him at 20. And the reason that I have him there is because I just have some pretty significant concerns with his ability to pass protect at the next level. I see some issues with foot speed, and I try and take every draft class and learn, and try and get better. And if Evan Neal taught me anything, that's foot speed is extremely important. And so, I think when we talk about Fuaga, I think he's got such powerful hands, and once you have him going vertically, like it's over. Like he's just a battering ram. But I just don't see him staying at tackle. But he has the potential to be an all pro guard. And so I kind of have him in that. I debated putting him in like the pure first round pick range. And then you have a bunch of guys that are that just have raw talent, like you said. Like I have Amarius Mims, J.C. Latham, and Tyler Guyton as these guys who have good athleticism, really high upside, just raw talent, but all have a few warts here and there. I really like Graham Barton. I have him as my 24th ranked prospect, um, and close to Latham. The reason I gave him the nod over Latham is because I think um, he has much better positional versatility, and I think you could get away with putting him at tackle, but I think he could play all five positions on the line and play them pretty well. Maybe not try him at center right away unless you have an emergency, but guard, like he's going to be a badass guard. Like I see a lot of Elijah Vera Tucker in Graham Barton,
Yeah, it's a good
and
comp for him. Yeah.
he could be something that and AVT went what 16, 17, something like that. I wouldn't
Yeah.
be shocked.
I think 14, something like that. Yeah, he was right in that range.
Yeah, yeah. So I really like Graham Barton, and then this is where I have Michael Penix in this range. I know you guys have him a little bit higher. Forget the medicals. I just have concern with this processing. I think a couple of things. And I don't want to spend too long talking about quarterbacks because you guys have talked about quarterbacks. I've talked about quarterbacks so much. I think processing, when it comes to the quarterbacks in this class, JJ McCarthy and Michael Penix have a little bit of work to do when it comes to processing and quick decision making. JJ McCarthy has the benefit of being young and being able to learn. And this is where Penix's age kind of starts to creep in a little bit. I also don't think Penix's short to intermediate accuracy is really all that good. I think he has probably the best arm talent in this class outside of Caleb Williams. I think he has the arm talent to make every throw. I don't think he has the accuracy to make every throw, if that makes sense. And then under pressure, I think he just doesn't perform as well. And so I see him as more of a latter half of the first round prospect. I kind of gave him, obviously, hindsight is 2020, but I kind of give him like a similar sort of grade to like Kenny Pickett. They're different, very different quarterbacks, but I think that's the range where I would be comfortable picking him. And then as far as other guys that I have in this range, I have the Robinson duo, Darius Robinson and Chop Robinson. Again, also two very different players. Darius Robinson's really, really built, and he's just a powerful, powerful guy. He doesn't necessarily have a huge amount of upside as a pass rusher, but as somebody who's kind of the heavier end in an underfront, or maybe even a 5 tech in an odd front, I think he would be a really, really strong option. He just comes off like a Kansas City Chief to me. They pick those types of players all the time. And then Chop Robinson, I just think he has some developing to do. I think similar to like the offensive tackles in this group, he has a lot of raw talent. He has the get off. He has some bend. He's actually bendier than I thought he was going to be, and he's got the athleticism. But I think again, similar to Jared Verse, I think he needs to learn how to finish. I think he needs to develop counters, and so for that, I think I've kept him down. I think if he stayed in school one more year, I think he would be one of the like a top 10 to 15 pick next year if he stayed in school and developed a little bit. But that's kind of, really the big portion of these first to second round guys. And then Brian Thomas and A.D. Mitchell, I just have really, really high. I think they're that next, that's the duo that I like more. I know, Monty, we had kind of, we have some differences there, I believe. But I think Brian Thomas might have been wide receiver 1 last year. He's just like such a smooth route runner, and like just seeing him getting in and out of his breaks, he doesn't slow down, and he's such a good player. And then A.D. Mitchell, I think, just height, weight, speed, I think he has the upside to be a wide receiver 1 with his body control, and just he's I kind of see him similar to Rome Odunze, but just kind of a poor man's version. And so those are the two guys that I have in that range as well.
That's awesome. There's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
I just kind of went on.
No, that was awesome. I appreciate it. I think, like, just quickly, I mean, we don't have to belabor the quarterback thing. I don't think anything you said is unfair. I think, JJ has there's projection on his side, and I think that those are all fair criticisms of him. With Penix, I guess maybe I'll push back a little bit. I felt that a lot of the stuff that's viewed as sort of the processing issues are more a function of two things. One, he ran that air raid system. Everything was outside the hash marks, and it was longer developing plays. And it was designed that way. And two, I just think the kid trusts his arm, and I think a lot of that is viewed. I mean, and also something that I mentioned when we did our QB review is like where Monty's like, I don't know if it's an anticipation thing or processing thing. And I think a lot of it is like, I actually think he does a decent amount of post-snap processing, and he tries to control DBs with his eyes. And you watch his film and you really pay attention to where his helmet is before he throws the ball. And he really does a lot of this stuff where I think if you're looking at it just in terms of timing of the pass and where the route is, you may say there's not enough anticipation there. The processing is slow. I felt that there was a lot of him holding DBs to the absolute last second and then turning and snapping the ball because he trusts his arm to beat people. And time will tell, right? In the NFL, the windows are tight. The reaction time is faster. So we're going to find out, but I'm just going to wager that what I'm saying is I think more along the lines of what we'll see in the NFL. But I am obviously I'm a big Penix defender, but that's just what I watched him carefully. I really felt like a lot of when you just watch where the back of the helmet was, a lot of it was just DB control. And when you hear him talk about how he goes through progressions, that's what he says, right? He's like, I see cover 6 to I have trips to this side, and I want to hit this guy, and I look at the DB off, and he like the stuff that you're seeing just objectively watching him is sort of what he's describing that he's doing on tape, right? So
Yeah.
we'll see in the NFL, but that's but I think it's all fair criticism. Let's talk about the Robinson brothers for a second. They're not brothers. I love Darius Robinson. What pisses me off is I remember I think Monty and I got a glimpse of Robinson in like October, and we're like, who's this guy? And we were starting to watch him in Missouri, and we're like, this guy's crazy. Like he's awesome. And
Yeah.
at the time, all the the big boards had him like 180, 107. Like it was way down. I'm like, oh, this guy. I remember sending it to Jabri and other people like, look at this guy. Next thing you know, Jeremiah comes out and he's number 30 on Jeremiah's board. I was like, oh, God damn it. And then he goes to the Senior Bowl and he's blowing up tackles. I think he's a 3-tech. I don't think he's an edge.
Okay.
He's about, 285, I think is what he weighed in at at the And if you look at Darius Robinson's career in college, he progressively moved further and further outside every single year. He started as like a 0. And every year he took more snaps going further and further, like 0, like 2-eye, 3-tech, and then this year truly an edge. I think where he really lands is as a 3-tech in the NFL, and I think he can be a dominant 3-tech. Like I think
that's very interesting.
Yeah. So I mean, I can see him as a 5-2. I'm not saying he couldn't do it, but like you said, that's more of like a 4-3 defensive end type, where he can be more like along those lines, hand in the dirt kind of guy who's just pushing on the tackle. But I really think where he performs his best, and you saw it on reps this year. If you go back and watch Darius, if you have time, go back and watch his film. There are plenty of reps where he lines up inside, inside the tackle or inside, right at the guard, and he one gaps really well, or he just blows them right back into the backfield. Like he's so powerful, he'll just take these guys on with leverage and just shove them back. So I think he's actually he's a bit of a sleeper if you think of him that way. It depends on how he gets used in the NFL, but I think he has that ability.
My pro comp for him and the way that I kind of see him playing and being successful in the league is Charles Omenihu, who really did well with Houston and then with Kansas City. Similar frame. I think he's like just a well-built, 280. He's not like, he doesn't carry a lot of fat, or a lot of, bulk in the midsection, right? He's just like this rocked up kind of dude with these big ass arms. And I just see him controlling tackles. I just see him controlling and collapsing, right? And so when you think about like some of these guys, and so that's why I said, I could potentially see him at 5 technique, sort of like late, when JPP kind of was like a bigger, when he gained some weight, very similar to that. But I mean, he's an explosive player, and that's why I have him like, as a top 32 player. He's an explosive player. His hands are explosive. He's powerful. So I have no reason to doubt that, he could succeed inside as a 3 technique. And he's probably going to do, I mean, let's be honest, he's probably going to do a bunch of everything. He's like one of those guys that you can put everywhere.
Sure.
But he's such an underrated player. And I think based off of where we both have him, like if Kansas City doesn't draft a wide receiver, like he's somebody that I could very much see as a Kansas City type player.
Absolutely. I think he's their type. Either him, a cornerback, or a wide receiver. I think that's kind of like where you expect them to land.
Yeah. Not necessarily a player comp for Robinson, but a role I could see him playing is I think you look at like what Leonard Williams did and the fact that he played a little bit of that edge role just because he was so athletic, but he was more of a 3-tech. Again, not necessarily a player comp, but just the way they'll be used. I think you could see a little bit of that to Darius Robinson in the NFL.
Yeah. So just actually looking at this, I'm actually I want to ask you guys about your thoughts on a player. So we have a pretty huge difference in how we see Troy Franklin.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to kind of ask you guys about him and what your thoughts are, because I don't really like Troy Franklin at all. To be honest with you. but I want to hear what you guys have to say about him.
Monty, you should do this one because he's your guy.
Yeah, Troy Franklin is definitely my guy. So for me, a big reason I like Troy Franklin is that he's just so productive. I mean, like, let's just start there with Troy Franklin. He's a guy who was productive last year going into the season, and then went out and matched another really good year this year. He's a guy who averages 3.32 yards per route run. And when I look at some of these advanced stats, the yards per route runner is something I definitely look into. And I think it's something that is one of the more predictive stats to try to get an idea, because everyone gets caught up on these box scores and what and all that type of stuff. But that's something I try to look at. And I think he's underrated as a route runner. I do think he is, for a guy who's as tall as he is really fluid, and I think he's gotten better and better each year. And he's just like a total track star. Like, I mean, you were a big Jalen Hyatt guy last year, and it reminds me a little bit of that on like his go routes. I think he just absolutely burns people, and he's so good at tracking the ball in the air. He's maybe not the best like contested catch guy.
That was my biggest issue with him is body control. Like, so if Jalen Hyatt were in this class, who would you rank higher? Because this is actually a really interesting conversation, because I had Jalen Hyatt as my 16th ranked player overall last year. I loved Jalen Hyatt. So who would you rate higher between Franklin and Hyatt, between the two as prospects?
I'd probably have Franklin higher.
Yeah,
Franklin higher.
Yeah. I think so too. I was actually thinking that recently, and I think it's a really good question. They would have been really close for me because I was also high on Hyatt, not as high as you, but higher than Sal, but probably be very close.
I liked Hyatt. I just thought he was kind of a one-trick pony.
Yeah, you were solidly day two, but you liked him.
I liked him because of what he is. I said he's really good at what he does, and there's nothing wrong with being a deep, like a vertical threat. But his lack of a route tree, whether that was by design or by virtue of his own ability, is something that like, I believe in route trees. All right, if you don't have it developed in college, you probably won't have it in the NFL for a while, and it just gives me that you have to be so good at the one thing you do. For it to work. The thing about Hyatt is he's really good at the thing he does. He gets separation on the vertical plane, and he has immensely, he just has really great body control, and his hands catching is fantastic for a guy his frame. So I think those things he does well. But I would take Franklin purely because I think he's a better route runner. I think his releases are better. I think even though they have a similar frame, I think Franklin is a little bit better at beating press and his release packages at the line of scrimmage to get separation are better. And I think he's just better at the stem, running a more diverse route tree. Not as good as a hands catcher as Hyatt. I agree with that. Not as good with body control as Hyatt. But I think he creates more separation than Hyatt on things other than than go routes. So I'd probably go with him. But it's close. I think they're reasonably close.
I think I can't disagree with anything you guys said. I definitely think that Franklin, at least, is more developed as a prospect when it comes to his route tree, obviously. But I think when it comes to route tree, I think you're a prisoner of your own scheme, in much the same way that we talk about what JJ McCarthy was allowed to do and what Michael Penix did. Right? It's a function of the scheme. And my concerns with Franklin is similar to that of, like a safety who's really great at everything but has trouble tackling. You know what I mean? And I don't think the separation is going to be as pronounced at the next level, even for a lot of these burners, right? Because even with Hyatt, right, who's like insanely fast, he was able to get separation last year, but definitely not to the degree that he was burning people in college. And I feel like the same thing is going to happen with Franklin. If you don't have that catch radius, and if you don't have that body control, then it's going to present issues at the next level. I mean, I like Franklin. He's like a top 50 I guess I have him at 54, like a top 50-ish guy for me. But it's just a very fun conversation, especially because we have somebody, that people will compare him to, just because of that speed. Um, and so that was just like a very interesting thing. I think he's one of the more polarizing prospects in this draft, for me at least. I know a lot of people like him, but
So what
that's one of my other hot takes.
we
Uh,
had a mock draft not too long ago
yeah,
where we had to decide between Brian Thomas Jr. in the second round when we had a 39th pick and Troy
yeah,
Franklin. And I think Monty wanted Franklin. I think I made the argument like we already have Jalen Hyatt,
yeah,
and like if you and I think I wanted a more physical receiver
yeah,
who was a more developed route runner. So I agree. I think they're similar. It's a tough call, but I'm kind of with you that there's a limited role for guys like Troy Franklin, but I think they can be productive. Like he doesn't fit the Giants. We already have Hyatt, right?
yeah.
You have
No,
Slayton, but
completely.
a team that needs that guy, I think he's going to be a very good player.
Yeah,
Um,
I you
it's
know
it,
it
it,
it's
go ahead.
interesting how we all look at these wide receivers because
Yeah,
I know like Sal and I we have a somewhat similar approach to these wide receivers, but I think that shows in a lot of these rankings. Like we have Lad McConkey pretty high here, and Sal and I are both very high on the route runners. Route running is like one of the main things. Like you said,
yeah,
Brian Thomas probably would have been your wide receiver one last year. Me and Sal have
yeah,
talked about that. He wouldn't have been for us. We still would have had Jordan Addison and Jackson Smith-Jigba because again, he fits more of that prototype of the route runner. That's type of kind of receiver we look for. So it's interesting with these guys. Brian Thomas, being an example, he ended up as our wide receiver 4. He's a little lower than you are. He was actually my wide receiver 5. He was really could go either. I put
yeah,
Lad McConkey on him, but I stacked him back to back. I kind of did it more as a statement than anything. I had him really, really close, just to show how much I like Lad McConkey. But the thing is for me with Brian Thomas is the way I see it is there's 3 wide receivers at the top. I mean, like we all see it that way.
yeah,
And then, I could easily call what Brian Thomas my wide receiver 4, and I wouldn't have any issue with that. But then, like after that, I honestly think Brian Thomas is closer to like wide receiver 10 than he is to wide receiver 3. I think that group after it is so close. I don't see like some people see
yeah.
Brian Thomas as like a clear top of that. I see it as a cluster, and like it's after that those top 3.
Well, I think that goes to the strength of the class, then
Yeah.
as opposed to like
This is
being
nasty class.
right. As opposed to, it's not a knock on Brian Thomas. It's just that there's so many guys who have that
Yeah,
kind of quality play at that like, so you could just rattle them off, right? Brian Thomas, A.D. Mitchell, Troy Franklin, Xavier Legette, um, you know, Xavier Worthy. I don't know who I'm missing. Probably
one of
somebody,
my
but they're
one of my favorite players, Ricky
Coleman.
Pearsall. He's
right.
so
Ricky,
I
he just
love
missed
Ricky
our list.
Pearsall.
Yeah,
He was in mine, and
Pearsall,
so was
yeah,
Coleman, but we pulled like he was at the very end.
Right, Roman Wilson, like McConkey, all these guys are sort of clustered together. I think there's not a lot differentiating them as prospects. They are going to be, I think, situation dependent on where they land.
Yeah.
Whereas the top 3 guys, I think, are as close to situation independent or scheme independent as you can get. I see Authentic. Shout out to him. He put in Javon Baker, one of my sleepers.
I thought this was an interesting point by Authentic. He said Lad McConkey just didn't have production for his liking. He said, well, Lad McConkey is the J.J. McCarthy wide receiver.
It's a fair statement.
Yeah, because he didn't have he only played 8 games and he had like
he got
800
hurt
yards or something like that. But if you look up, just like JJ, when you look at like the advanced metrics on like a per down basis on a per route run, he was like top 5 in this class. So it's where you're saying like when you're taking it with like, well, if you give him more routes, he's gonna produce more. It's like, but he didn't do that. So it's interesting. It's an interesting discussion.
So Authentic put up his last one on Javon Baker. I love Javon Baker.
I do too.
I don't know if he was he in your top 100.
He was, but he was towards the bottom. I had him at 97.
Yeah. So I think I think if you're looking for an X receiver, right? An outside threat receiver who's highly productive. His yards per route run were in the threes. Who's really good at contested catches. Who's just
Good after the
a
catch.
speed like a speed strength like monster and good after the catch. Javon Baker is a guy that I think is a value pick on day 2. Somewhere on day 2, he's a value. Maybe day 3, but most likely day 2. I think late day 2 is where he's probably going to go, but who knows? Maybe he'll fall.
Do you remember what Justin Pennick said about him when he was on our show?
It was not complimentary, if I recall.
Yeah, he said they got to talk to him, and he got like very like a
Kadarius Toney,
like unseriousness
Oh, geez.
to his personality.
Yeah, well, that's for the team to figure out.
Yeah, I
I
can't get that out of the back of my head now. But
right.
man, he is a fun player, especially where he's getting like projected right now. He is a great value.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can say that, just from a pure height, weight, speed perspective, I can't say no to him. I just think he's not, when we talk about, just refined aspects of his game, I think he's just a little bit less refined. As a route runner, he's still getting in and out of his breaks. It's not the prettiest, but obviously he has that body control. He has the ability to win at every part of the route tree, from the release all the way to the catch point. So I get it. I definitely get it. I think from that standpoint, I think if we're looking at a height, weight, speed guy, I love Xavier Legette.
Yep.
I think he had an inconsistent Senior Bowl, but I can't. This is going to sound like high praise, and I'm not saying he's going to have the same success as this guy, but he just reminds me of DK Metcalf.
Yep.
Just the way he looks, the way he plays. He just plays kind of like an asshole. Like when you watch, he was the only person that Spencer Rattler could throw to, and half the time, like, Spencer Rattler was just throwing it up for dear life because his offensive line was just absolute trash.
Right.
And the way that Legette just was able to just, box defenders out, make plays at the catch point. It's just, he's someone, when you look at height, weight, speed, I would be so thrilled if he made it to 47. I would be so happy. He's exactly, such a good compliment. I mean, he doesn't run great routes, and he has the lateral agility of a dump truck, same as DK Metcalf. But when you're built like Xavier Legette and DK Metcalf, like, who gives a shit, Just throw it up. And so I would definitely take Xavier Legette round 2. Then
Mina Kimes was talking about him on her show.
Yeah.
And she said that she ran into him at the combine. She was talking. I forgot who she was talking to. It might have been Nate Tice or somebody, but she's like, she said she ran into Connor Rogers and they were talking, and then Xavier Legette like got on the elevator with them or something.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, all I could say is that is a large human being. I mean, he is like that power forward, wide receiver on the outside. I love what you said, like, about the boxing people out, because that's what he does. Like, people make such a big deal about his height not being 6'3" and being 6'1", but he has a 40-inch vertical, if I recall, and he uses it, right? It's not just there. He actually uses
That's
it.
important.
Right.
Absolutely.
He high points the ball and he boxes out defenders. Like, they have no shot at that thing. And despite his hands being, maybe a little undersized, relative to what people thought they would be, he doesn't drop anything. Like, he has a massive grip on the football. So I love Legette for like a perfect fit for the basketball theory of developing the Giants team. He would be a perfect complement to what we have.
Yeah, like, look, if he's 6'3", he might get pushed up a little bit on my board, but at the same time, we probably wouldn't have a chance at him the second round in that case. Yeah. And he, like you said, he uses it well. It's funny enough here is we, our combined Xavier Legette ranking actually ended up exactly the same as you. We both had him here at 39. But yeah, I had the exact same comp when we were doing our Senior Bowl review. I called him DK Metcalf. it's before the size, but I still think he plays that way despite him being 6'1". He plays exactly like DK Metcalf. So yeah, I'm a big fan of his. I wanted to bring up something else. Do you have anything else on this, either of you guys?
No, good.
So one thing I want to talk about was the offensive tackles a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about that. I want to unpack that a little bit. The first thing I wanted to unpack, because we are all the same on this. Funny enough, you asked me for a hot take a while ago, KSI, and this is the one I gave you. I told you Troy Fountainu, I think is how you say it. I said he was my offensive tackle 3. And it seems like that's becoming closer and closer to a consensus. Sal was the same place as me when I said that. But see, I can see that he is also your offensive tackle 3 now.
You convinced me to go back and watch him again, and you convinced me to change him, change out, put Mims back a little bit, and because Mims was my OT3 prior to that, and then Monty, you get the credit for making me go back and watch him again, and I agree. I think he's just such a well-balanced player. I think I don't. So I forget who was. There was somebody saying that he's going to be better served going inside, and I actually don't think so. I think he's actually better as an offensive tackle. And the one thing I like about Troy Fountainu is just the balance. There are players in this class with a lot of balance issues.
Like Joel.
Yeah. I would say that Troy Fountainu probably has the best balance and the most even keeled, I guess. I don't know if that's even a thing, but just watching him, you know exactly what I'm saying. Keeping the defender in front of him and being able to adjust. I think that I agree with you. I think he's probably I feel like he's going to be a consensus OT3 for a lot of people as we head into the draft. I guess depending on how they feel about Fuaga, but good call on that, Monty.
So we actually, going back, we reviewed him in our interior O-line episode because he was viewed coming into the season through the summer scouting as like a guy who projected on the interior, and we both watched him and we're like, how is this guy in interior O-line? Like, yes, I think he actually could be good on the inside, but I think, if I recall, I described his stance. He has like the balance of like a sumo wrestler, the way he sets up. Like he has this ridiculously wide base. His hands are like in perfect sync with his legs. His hip rotation is smooth. He's got quick feet. He's just so good out there. And then he has like they were saying, like they were talking about, like, well, he projects better, but I'm looking at that 34-inch arm length, perfectly good for tackles. And he moves so well. Like how is this guy not a tackle? And he had such a great year. So I think he's a tackle. And could he play in the interior? Yes, but I think he's a solid tackle. I think he's a guy who could play left tackle, right tackle. His technique is so good. I think he'd be seamless putting on either side. So I'm with you. I think at the end of the day, he is going to be OT3 off the board. I don't know if NFL teams are going to buy into the Fuaga hype the way the media consensus is. I'd be surprised if they did, honestly. So I think Fountainu is going to go off the board before him.
And he's been phenomenal. I mean, he killed the combine. It was just no surprise. He looked so fluid moving through those drills. The thing is, I think that a lot of people put him the inside is that he does overset sometimes, and they're kind of like, oh, if you just move him inside, you can't overset anymore. But they just do this every year with unnecessary players. They said the exact same thing about Tristan Wirfs, if you remember correctly. They tried moving Tristan Wirfs inside because he would overset and get beat inside, and there was like, move him into guard, and you don't have to worry about that anymore. It's like that's like he's so athletic, and the reason he oversets is because he can move, he can get inside so quickly, and he can still play those guys. It doesn't always look the cleanest, but like he can make the play on the guy. So I love him. He just looks, sometimes when you watch a lineman they just look like they're playing the game how it's supposed to be played. And
Absolutely.
he's one of those guys. He just looks like a natural offensive lineman. I love him. He is my clear 3. With that said, we all had Fuaga as 4. Well, at least me and Sal combined ended up with him at 4. I don't remember if you had him at 4 in yours, but the reason I put him at 4 personally is not even that I like Fuaga that much more than Mims or Latham or anything like that. But the reason I came to that is I don't feel that much more confident in Latham or Mims being a successful offensive tackle. I think it's probably somewhere around the same likelihood, but I feel a lot better about Fuaga moving into guard if he can't succeed at tackle and being a very good guard in the NFL. So that's what gave him the bump over the other guys to me.
That's the exact reason why I put him there as well. I still love Mims. Mims didn't do anything for me to move him down. It was just more so I ended up liking Fontenot a lot more, and then just again, like I said, the ceiling at guard for Fuaga kind of just as a pure prospect, I think he's better. And then Mims for me, like, you guys know I love Amarius Mims. Like he moves so well. For someone his size, he's a massive dude. And like I'm so sorry to keep bringing up Evan Neal, but you look at they're similar sizes, but Mims is able to carry that. I know he's only played like 800 snaps or something like that. He's played like almost nothing, but you look at the way that he's able to move, and you're looking at someone that could be like Jordan Mailata. Like that is how effortlessly he's able to move, how effortlessly he's able to get to the next level. And obviously somebody that size, he's gonna like bitch slap the shit out of you, if you're a linebacker or God forbid a corner or safety. But D-Kid and Authentic in the chat are talking about his injuries, and that's when you get to somebody that size. We've seen it with Mekhi Becton. We've seen it with Evan Neal. Like, that's definitely a concern. The human body is just not – it has not evolved to handle that much weight. And so that is definitely a concern. And something that I think a lot of all of these players like at that size are taking time bombs, I think.
Yeah.
For sure.
And Latham is the same. To me, Latham,
Yeah.
I cannot stand Latham as a prospect. I have to put him up here. But he's Evan Neal, like 2.0 in all the worst ways. Like,
all like the failures in NFL, Evan Neal.
He's every Alabama offensive lineman nightmare you can imagine, like all rolled into one. There's so much bust potential.
Don't put that leatherwood stink on him. Come on, man.
When he's bad, he's really bad.
Yeah.
And we said this before. Like, I did not like his tape. When he loses reps, oh my God, does he lose them? And there was no rep more obvious than the final play in the semifinal game against Michigan, right? On that 4th down, I mean, they called a quarterback power from the 2-yard line, but my God, do you remember what happened to him? I mean, Mason Graham sent him flying like he was a cartoon character out of the screen and blew up the play. I mean, on the final play of the season. So I can't trust guys like that. I really am not a big Latham guy. I know he's going to get taken high, but I want no part of that guy if we end up going lineman at any point. But yeah, I think it's a good lineman discussion. The guys that I think might be in play for the Giants, though, like we talked about a lot of guys who I don't think they're necessarily going to be talking about, but guys worth discussing the Giants might consider are guys who could be there at 47, potentially, depending on how things shake out. So I think the two guys worth mentioning here that are standing out on the list who are kind of in the same area are Jordan Morgan and Christian Haynes.
Oh
And I
yeah.
think we have them ranked around the same place as you.
Yeah.
I'm a huge Jordan Morgan fan.
Same.
I think he's another guy that people say, well, he can play on the inside, and he can't. I think he's so good as like a zone blocker and moving to the next level, and he can pull really well on in other plays. But I think he's fundamentally just a really good technically sound tackle, and I think he has the movement skills and the leverage to play tackle very well at the NFL level. Coming off an ACL this year, he
Yep.
didn't skip a beat. That's remarkable. So I'm really a big fan of his. I think I don't know if he's going to be an All Pro, but I think he's the kind of guy, if you draft him, he's just sort of like that quiet left tackle that you have for 10 years, that maybe he's not an all-pro guy, but he's just steady and he's just always there. And you don't worry about it. Like, he's just a good left tackle in the NFL for like a decade. And I think that's how I would describe what I see from Jordan Morgan. And I'd like to get your thoughts on that in a second. But Christian Haynes is the other guy who climbed up quickly to dominant right guard. I think, I think he's the best pure single position lineman up here. Like, the other guys all have versatility. This guy's a right guard, and he's a damn fine right guard. And I think that he's so good at what he does, despite not having flexibility of his position, that I think you have to talk about him being like a top of the second round type of guy.
Yeah.
So yeah, what are your thoughts on those two?
So I would say maybe Jackson Powers Johnson at center kind of gives Christian Haynes a run for his money as far as single position. But I agree. As a pure guard prospect, I think the balance and power that Christian Haynes shows, and again, I feel like I'm talking about balance a lot, but again, I have PTSD from Evan Neal, so
We all
that's
do. Yeah.
that's going to be a big thing that I talk about. I think, yeah, just prototype right guard. Jordan Morgan, I really, really liked him. I really liked his footwork. I think he's a bit passive, which is like the one flaw that I had. I mean, if he was a bit more aggressive, and if his hands were a little bit more nasty, I guess, I'd have a first round grade on him. He's not to the level that Matt Pert was. Matt Pert refused to do anything but maybe give a light tap or maybe a soft hug to incoming defenders. But I wish he was just a little bit more aggressive. But I think from a pass protection standpoint, I mean, he's close to being set it and forget it. As a, like you said, a quiet left tackle type. I have my doubts that Christian Haynes is going to make it to 47.
Yeah.
But I mean, having something like Andrew Thomas, John Runyon, JMS, Christian Haynes, Jermaine Illuminor, that gets me a little excited. That's a good, dare I say, at least league average offensive line, which is about 16 spots higher than what it was last year. So Christian Haynes would be one of my top targets at 47. Jordan Morgan, I think I think he's a pure tackle as well. I don't buy the whole guard thing with him either. Just because we have Illuminor, and I don't know if we're counting on Neal at all. I don't know how we feel about that, but I think there's a little bit of a I don't know if I'd spend a second round pick for offensive tackle that doesn't really have guard versatility. That's just my thoughts on it, but I think he's more than worthy of being that player at 47 if we went there.
Yeah. So I'll say, it's funny enough is, when we did our rankings, Jordan Morgan was a guy I left off that I was like, when we compare him, like, no, I probably shouldn't have left him off. And Christian Haynes was a guy that Sal left off, and he was like, yeah, I probably shouldn't have left him off. But Christian Haynes, I was funny enough, I had him in the 30s or a little bit higher than this, but like, you're in here at 37, same spot. I honestly thought we were doing like a little bit of a hot take having him this high, but just where I've seen him, but it seems like you're right there with us. I love Christian Haynes. Kind of like the stuff that we were saying about Troy Fautanu, just like a guy who makes it look natural, just a guy who looks like a natural offensive lineman. He's a guy I see that with too. I mean, he killed it at the Senior Bowl, which helped my like for him even more. I mean, I got to see him really kill those one-on-one drills. It gave me a lot of confidence in his pass protection. They're not meant to win those the way he was winning them. And I love him as a run blocker. He is like the ultimate technician as a run blocker. When we were reviewing him for the Senior Bowl, I was saying, like, it looks like he's like working a sled every single time he gets into the run game. Like, he's just doing it exactly how you're like coached to do it. And he's just a people mover. Like, he's always getting movement. He is, I think it was Walt who WBG. He put out, I think, an RAS comp for him, and he comped very, very similarly to Chris Snee. So for all you Giants fans out there, if we end up pulling the trigger on Christian Haynes at 47 because he's there, you always go back to maybe we're getting our next Chris Snee. So
he was also a second-round pick.
Yep, exactly. I'd be all over it.
In the Northeast.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
So yeah, both really good players. Let's see.
You want to get into some of these defensive players towards the bottom of the top 50 here?
Sure.
So the theory of the case here, at least from a draft perspective, is I think let's just say for argument's sake, the Giants don't go quarterback, and which I think is becoming a more and more real proposition with just the way things are shaking out with the 6th pick. And they go wide receiver. I'm of the belief that if you can't take a swing on one of the top guys and you miss out on Penix as your fallback, I'm of the belief that you shouldn't even swing at quarterback the rest of the draft. And here's my reason for that. One, we only have 6 picks. So to get more than that, we're going to have to make some trades. Two, as we're talking about, this is a really great draft class. Like, at least for the top 100, this has tremendous value. After that, right, falls off. But those first 100 picks are really solid. In my opinion, if the Giants choose not to get a top-tier talent at quarterback, if they can't get one, they choose not to go in, I personally believe their best bet is just ride it out for the season. They're not winning anything this year anyway, in terms of like Super Bowls or whatever. And they should maximize roster construction. I think the probability of hits on the players in the top 100 in this class are very high. Just there's high quality players. And I would like to take as many swings on non-quarterbacks as possible then, if they're not going to take one in the first round. So I can envision a world where we take Rome Odunze or Malik Neighbors with a 6th pick. If that's the case, I'm personally looking, depending on who's on the board at 47, I'm seriously contemplating, if it's available, to trade back a couple of times like we did in 2022, slide down 6 to 10 spots, and pick up an extra day 2 pick, pick up an extra early day 3 pick, and go from there. But let's just say we did that. Even if we didn't do that, I think if you've got your wide receiver 1 with a 6th pick, I think there's some high quality defensive players that you have to seriously consider here with the 2nd, pick. And I'm looking at defensive linemen, guys like Chris Jenkins. Monty forced me to put Tavondre Sweat on this list. Otherwise, I wouldn't have put him there. I was not a fan personally, but like, not for us at least.
I'm saying for us, not for us.
Absolutely. And then you got some of these corners: Mikey Sainristil, Ennis Rakestraw, Kamari Lassiter. So, and then we have TJ Tampa and Peyton Wilson also make our list. So, can you tell us about your thoughts on some of those defensive players and that thought process in general?
I agree with you. Like, 99% of the way. 100% if it's the Giants. In general, right? The Eagles always spend, a day 2 pick on a quarterback, and they kind of have this quarterback factory where they can develop players who can eventually take over for them and create a market inequity there, or send that player for picks later. But I think that is a special case use, and I think that's for teams that are a little bit more complete. For the Giants, I agree with you 100%. I wouldn't be pissed if they took a stab at Spencer Rattler at pick 70 or in the 4th round, but I do think that there's probably a better use of resources otherwise. So I'm right there with you in terms of that draft philosophy. If I were a betting man, and I only am a small amount of time, I would pencil in Mike Sanderstill at 47 as a New York Giant. When you talk about what Shane Bowen wants to do on defense, and we talk about the safeties and why we thought Xavier McKinney was going to be we were going to re-sign him because he's such a huge part. The safety is the nickel defender is such a huge part of Shane Bowen's system. I think Mike Sanderstill is he's Kenny Moore. He's potentially somebody like Trent McDuffie, somebody who can work the inside, mix it up in zone and as a man cover corner inside, and he can pound for pound. I know he's not the biggest guy, but he has some of the biggest hits as a small dude, and I think he would fit so well and be. It's like saying a press man corner is the key that makes Wink Martindale's defense go. Well, having that nickel defender is the key that makes Shane Bowen's defense go. And I can't think of a better fit than Mike Sainristil, at that spot. So he would be my pick, when it comes to defenders that would realistically be there for the Giants. Ennis Rakestraw, I saw a lot of Emmanuel Forbes with Ennis Rakestraw. I think that he can project to be a little bit of a ball hawk, but I can also foresee him not being a great fit for us specifically. I think he's more of a pure zone corner in my eyes. Kamari Lassiter, I loved. When I watched him, I did think he was a little bit slow, not the fastest corner, and he kind of proved that at the combine. He's one of those. I think there were a lot of players this year at the combine that ran slower than I thought they would, and I don't fully trust that. I don't think Kamari Lassiter is as slow as what his combine numbers were, but just long speed is a little bit of a concern of mine, and I think he's a boundary only corner. Do I think he's worth pick number 47? I don't think we're going to get him at 70. So if you really like Kamari Lassiter, I'm for it. I don't have any issues. Tavondre Sweat, I love as a prospect. I don't see a huge difference between what Sweat was able to do and what Jordan Davis was able to do, to be honest with you. But, again, if you're not Dexter Lawrence in the way that you can finish as a pass rusher from the nose or a one tech spot, you don't deserve to go in the first round. And we're seeing Jordan Davis as a player who probably didn't deserve to go in the first round. Chris Jenkins, I think he can play at 1 or 3 technique, to be honest with you. I really, really like him. I think he would be a potential option for us at 47. TJ Tampa, I fluctuate on, we kind of have him in that same 48 to 50 range. I think as a boundary corner, he's probably going to be one of the top boundary corners for me. I liked him a little bit more than Kamari Lassiter. I think he has a little bit more speed.
See,
So I'd probably take him. I'd probably take him over Lassiter.
I gotta stop you there. Monty and I have we're at the point where we kind of have conversations almost daily. We fought for the longest time this week over this stupid issue, like Lassiter versus Tampa. I'm a Tampa guy. He's a Lassiter guy,
Yeah.
and I personally, I mean, I like Lassiter's technique, but I see a guy who
Yeah.
gets cooked.
Yeah.
I feel like he makes up with contact that you cannot get away with in the NFL.
Yeah.
On recovery, and that was my concern with him, because his speed is an issue. I agree that Goon and Monty were like, Tampa's stiff. I agree, he's a little bit stiff, but he's a boundary corner, and I think he has good long speed. He has great length, and he's really physical at the catch point in a good way. Like, I don't see a guy taking a ton of penalties there. He hits people, knocks the ball out, uses his wingspan. I think he's a really good complementary type player to what Deontay Banks would bring. So I'm higher on him too, personally. But I would, if I had to choose an outside corner, I would not be opposed to taking Tampa at 47 if that was the goal of the pick. I think he's a good pick. But I'm with you. I think Mikey Sanderson is better than all of them. As a pure football player, what he does is he's a thumper. He's a difference maker. He's a guy that brings a certain level of football gravitas and energy that I think immediately starts leading the culture of your defensive locker room, which I think is something that matters. I think he plays with that level of aggression that I think other guys follow. And this is a guy who's a wide receiver, initially at Michigan, and he converted. So his innate instincts at defensive back are remarkable for a guy who played wide receiver all those years. I think the sky's the limit on him. The only knock on him is he's like 5'9.5" or something like that, right? But he doesn't play small. He plays real big. So I would be thrilled if we took him at 47.
Yeah, Lassiter, something, or not, sorry, Sanders still something we brought up. We were talking about is he has a little bit of that Devin Witherspoon to him, where he's just a guy who's small, but he plays big. He you wouldn't think of it the way he plays. He absolutely messed people up. So I got to defend my guy. I will push back a little bit on Lassiter. So he didn't run at the combine. He did run at the pro day, but there was mixed results. Some people had him in the low 4.5. Some people had him in the low 4.6.
Yeah.
You ended up getting mixed numbers there. So it's hard for me to know which exactly it was. But I'll say he is not like a top end speed guy, but I think he's so technically sound. And I didn't think that he was an overly grabby guy. He was only penalized once this entire season. He never got burnt for more than 50 yards in a game. He didn't let up a single touchdown this entire season. And he played in the SEC. He played as good as competition as anybody, and he's just so technically sound. That's what I love. And he's a dog, dude. When he plays, you see him make a tackle, and he's smashing his helmet. Like, I just love the attitude he plays with, and I love how technically sound he is as a player. So that's why I'm a big Lassiter guy.
I'm gonna bring up one player that isn't on your screen that I am higher on than most, if not everybody else. And I would love for this player, even at pick 47, that's Miami safety Cam Kinchins. He's almost nobody's safety one. I think pretty much everybody has Tyler Nubin as their first safety. Kinchins was my 42nd ranked player, I think. I am a University of Miami fan, so I've watched more of their games than anybody else's. I don't know if that colors my opinion or not, but he's going to fall because he didn't have a great combine. He didn't run fast, but I don't think that shows up in his film. And when you put on University of Miami film, he is someone that has, I'm not going to say Kyle Hamilton range, but he's rangy enough where that 40 doesn't matter. And he always kept the ball in front of him, and he was very, very, very aggressive. D-Kid saying he gave up a lot of big plays. Yes, there are mental mistakes. He did make some mental mistakes, and so it looked like he got cooked. But I don't think that's a physical barrier, and I kind of equate it to concentration, like a wide receiver having concentration drops, which can happen, obviously, right, in big moments. And as a safety, that's a big problem, and that's why he's not going to be a second round player. I think he's going to fall into the third round. But if you're looking for a smart, tough, dependable player, that I think would fit really, 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 really well. Fantastic tackler. I think I love Cam Kinchins a lot. And he's my safety one. He is going to be he did give up big plays in 2023. He didn't give up a lot of big plays in 2022. And I think like the upside with him is pretty great. So he's someone I gotta go to bat for. But if we get him at 70, like I'll be thrilled.
I'll defend him too. So he was our safety one when we did our review
Yeah.
of safeties, and I thought he was the most well-rounded safety in the class because he could play single high, he could play cover two, he could play in the box, he can play like a nickel, and he had the athleticism to do all that. I agree with you. His testing doesn't really reflect what you see on tape, nor does it really matter. Safety testing is really not all that important. It's a very cerebral position. It's about reading plays and taking good angles, and as opposed to just running in a straight line. I will say that I think, and this is just my theory because I watch a decent amount of I watch a lot of football, period, but I thought that the defensive play calling and defensive play design at Miami this year really hurt some of their prospects that should be viewed higher, specifically Kinchins and Leonard Taylor.
Yeah.
Because, with Kinchins, I feel like they asked him to do a lot more than a safety should have to do this year.
Yeah.
And I felt like he was biting off a lot more than he could chew, which I don't think is a way he would be utilized in the NFL.
Yeah.
Like, if you envision him in a system with Shane Bowen, he's going to start off in a two deep shell and he's going to rotate either into the box or into a single high, which is exactly where he excels and how he played in 2022. Right. And I think he'd be perfectly good there. With Leonard Taylor, that man is a pure pass rushing three tech who has the upside to be a 3-down lineman. He had an 18% pass rush win rate, 18% playing mostly out of the zero tech this year. He had no business playing zero, but that's where they put him. I have no idea what the thought process was. He really is. And his stock plummeted because of the way he was utilized. If Leonard Taylor was utilized as a pure three tech, I think we'd be talking about him as a borderline first rounder.
Yep. He was one of the guys that I was going to mention. That's funny. I agree.
So, I mean, I just like, I think when you see guys who are that good coming into the season and then they fall off, it's worth going back and seeing why they fell off, right? So for these two, I truly believe it was Miami defensive play calling and scheme that hurt them. There was nothing physically wrong with these guys. I don't think they suddenly became bad football players. Whereas with Kalen King, I really believe like that's a guy who I don't know what happened to him physically, but he was just not the same player, and he fell apart. And I thought he had no business declaring this year. Like he had to go back to Penn State, and he had more eligibility left, and he should have reestablished himself as a top prospect. I'm pretty sure he's a UDFA at this point. Like I have a hard time seeing him.
I didn't put him on the 100.
Right. So I mean, whereas these guys, I think, were victims of circumstance. So I'm going to back you up on that. But I will say that as a Giants fan, I think these guys are going to fall. Like both of them. Like I can see Kinchins being a late third, and I can absolutely see Taylor falling into day 3.
Yep, I agree.
And I think those are guys you may want to think about grabbing.
It's funny is when we did the review for the defensive lineman, that was actually something I said with Leonard Taylor. I mean, I can see this going one of two ways. I could see Leonard Taylor finishing this year and being a top 10 pick, and I could see Leonard Taylor being a day 3 guy by the end of this year, and it ended up going that way. But there's so much talent there. But I do agree with you on Kinchins, especially because a comp that you use, Sal, for him is Xavier McKinney, where the guy was a little bit of a do-it-all safety. They didn't have the best combine. I know McKinney was hurt to his credit, but I really like Kitchens, and I would love him with pick 70. I think he would be a fantastic value.
I mean, I don't think Tyler Newman had the greatest RAS like overall
No.
athletic testing.
No,
He also ran slow.
Yeah, and I don't think Jaden Hicks had the greatest. Like, I mean, again, it doesn't really matter that much for these guys. Like, it's all about about reading the play and processing mentally first, and then taking good angles and making sure you're in a position to make the play. Second, it has far less to do with like how explosive you are or how fast you run a 40. I think that's so unimportant for safeties.
Yeah,
It's just looking at this, and I know it's top 100 for me and not top 50 for you guys. I was actually surprised at how many safeties made my list. I thought going into this, I thought it was kind of a weaker safety class, but there's actually a good number of starting caliber safeties for me. I had Kinchins, Newbin, then I had Hicks, followed by Cole Bishop, who I watched after hearing Nick Filato talk about him. I went back and I watched him because I was not that impressed with Sione Vaki, but
wait till you see him play running back. Wait till you see him play running back.
Yeah, right. And then Dadrian Taylor Demerson also was, kind of a really nice surprise. And so I was actually kind of shocked at just how many safeties I liked looking back at this. And then just to sort of wrap up with some of the defensive backs, I was also a big fan of Kyrie Jackson. I think it's funny, Monty. I kind of see him as like the Oregon defense version of Troy Franklin. The corner version of Troy Franklin. Emphasis on height when you go to height, weight, speed. People want to make the comparison to who's that Seattle Seahawks corner?
Tariq Woolen.
Yeah,
Tariq Woolen. Which to be honest with you, I can kind of see a little bit when I saw him. He's not the smoothest, going transitioning from back pedal, but he's a powerful player. He's what, 6'4", 6'3", 6'4".
Yeah,
and
huge wingspan.
He doesn't use, and sometimes you can be too tall as a corner, like you don't have that fluidity as a corner. But I think he does, which is why I had him at, with the top 50 grade. So he's somebody else. I don't know that the Giants, he fits exactly what the Giants want to do, but he's someone that I would also consider in that range.
I liked him when we saw him, for the same reasons you mentioned. I think these guys who have these huge wingspans at the boundary and who have enough speed, like they have so many ways to break up a play. Like just their stride length, they're going to stay with guys, and their wingspan is going to break up a lot of contested balls. And it's just hard to get around them. And I think that there is something you saw in film with him is he didn't get targeted a lot. If you look at his absolute target numbers and target share in Oregon, and I think if you watch him, you can see I think he just takes away throwing lanes with his size.
Yeah.
I think quarterbacks look that way, and all you see is green. With the guy standing there, it's hard to throw at a guy of that size if he can stay stride for stride with receivers, and he doesn't get burned a lot. So I like him. I think he's going. I think he's going in the third round personally. Maybe he'll sneak into the second, but I think he's going day 2. There are definitely some other guys. I think you get into the deeper parts of the class. We didn't mention, we must mention Max Melton, who's rightfully climbing the boards, and I think he's the most upside of a lot of the guys we're discussing because he can play outside, he can play inside, physical, fast, blew up the combine. I like him. Absolutely. I think I know you had him on your list somewhere. I don't remember where exactly.
67.
I think that's about right. I can see him sneaking into the second round, maybe early third, but if he's there at 70 and we've gone, offense, or something like that, or offense and D line, I'd be thrilled with grabbing a
Yeah,
Max Melton at 70. You know, uh,
absolutely.
I think he'd be a nice addition. I think he can do a little bit of what Sainer still does, but he can actually play the outside.
So, I'm just looking here. I'm kind of looking at some of your later ones, just some guys who stand out to me as, a guys you have a little bit later here than I might. I mean, I do the top 100. Maybe I'm wrong, but where I'd have them. Names that
Mm.
stand out to me. Brandon Dorless stands out to me a little bit. Jeremiah Trotter stands out to me. I'm a big Trotter fan, but I know there is like physical limitations there. And then I would say Jalen Polk and Marshawn Lloyd. Those are probably the names that stand out to me. You want to touch on on your thoughts with any of those?
Yeah. So Jalen Polk, I tweeted this out. He reminds me so much of Jordan Matthews coming out of Vandy, I think. Same frame, same sort of play style, kind of a bigger sort of slot receiver at the next level in my mind. Um, I think he, from a height, weight, speed perspective, pretty damn good. But I think his catch radius and level of body control, and that's ultimately why Jordan Matthews failed in Philadelphia. Was he wasn't, despite his size, he was not really that contested catch guy that they wanted him to be as a big slot. And that's ultimately how I see Jalen Polk, and that's why I kind of had him lower. Obviously, I could be very wrong, but that's one reason why I had him a little bit low. Jeremiah Trotter. When I watched Clemson, and overall, I wasn't really big on the Clemson and you can tell by where I put them, right? I wasn't huge on the Clemson defense. Like,
Yeah.
I think my highest rated Clemson defender was Rook or Horror. I can't ever
Aurora.
Yeah. But he was late filling in gaps several times when I watched those games. He was just a bit slow on the uptake, and then match that with like his less than impressive athletic tools. I think he's a smart player, but I just think those limitations are gonna just, I don't know, like he's like a late day 3 type of guy. Like I think there's a huge excuse me, a huge difference between where he's at versus my LB1, which is Edgerrin Cooper and Peyton Wilson. Um, I think those guys are aggressive. They have the athletic traits, and they know what they're doing. Whereas Jeremiah Trotter, I think, doesn't. And then who else did you mention?
Brandon Dorless was one that stood out a little bit too.
Brandon, yeah. Brandon Dorless. I really kind of went back and forth on him. Like, obviously, right? Like, he blew up the combine, right? I think he had like a sub 4.940 or something like that. At his size, it was insane. But I didn't see like that quickness really show up a lot in that Oregon defense. I think he has trouble with leverage. Like, that's the difference between him and Johnny Newton, to be honest with you. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think he played with good leverage at all. How tall is Dorset? I think he's a pretty tall guy too, right?
6'3", I think.
6'3". Okay, not tall, but tall compared to me, but not tall in the grand scheme of things. And and so I feel like he's one of those guys that's gonna be put at 3 tech, looks the part, but doesn't really get the same pass rush wins that you would want him to. And that's why I have a guy like Leonard Taylor above him, even though I
Mhm.
think Wells probably ends up being a little bit more balanced in terms of run defense. Leonard Taylor has a ways to go as a run defender. Again, part of that is probably because he was asked to two gap a lot when that's not his game. D-Kit's asking about Michael Hall. I kid you not, he was actually like 102. He was going to be like the next guy up. And the reason why I have 101 is because I accidentally forgot. Monty didn't tell you this, but I accidentally forgot to put Jared Verse in there when I sent the first version, and he was missing. So I was like, okay, I'll give you an extra one with Ray Davis. But Michael Hall, I think, suffers a little bit from the same issues with Brandon Dorlus, but he has leverage issues. He is more successful as a pass rusher, I think, than Dorlus, but I can see him getting washed out at the next level versus the run, which is why I was a little lower on him.
He's actually a lot like Braden Fisk. I think
Yeah.
he, in my opinion, like he's a great pass rusher. One gapper into the backfield to break up plays, great. Double teams, he's erased. Like he has zero ability to hold up against double teams. And I think those are the kinds of guys that they're just not 3-down linemen.
Yeah.
They're situational guys, and I feel like, and I think I like Braden Fisk, but I feel like some of the Braden Fisk hype is a little bit out of control. Like he's a really good player, but he's also a guy that struggles against doubles. And you're just not going to be an interior D lineman who gets washed on double teams and be a 3-down lineman. Like
and he has injury concerns.
Right, and he has smaller arm, if I'm not mistaken. So
yeah, it's getting a little bit crazy.
I feel like the media hype on him is a little higher than the NFL hype. Maybe he goes higher than I think, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Braden Fisk fall. I like him, but I can see him falling.
The first round talk with him, I thought, was kind of crazy.
Yeah,
to be honest.
I agree with you. He has enough question marks attached to him, and it's like I like him and all, but he also didn't like he tested great. Don't get me wrong, but he didn't test like generationally like you that kid from the kid last year who went to the Colts. I mean, everybody athletic. Adebawore. Like he tested like generationally. Like I understood it a little bit with him because he like tested like a wide receiver.
He went in the fourth round.
Yeah, and he fell, and even he fell. So,
let me see. We're winding down here, but I'm just looking through your list, and I like it. You have Benson on at 74. I like that. I wish we could get him, but I have a feeling he's going to be out of our range by the time we address some of our more pertinent needs. But yeah, I mean, I really like your list. I'm just kind of perusing through it. It's solid. One thing we should touch on before like we close out is, what we're talking about here is a vertical board, right? Just kind of stacking your prospects as you grade them, 1 through whatever, 100, 1 to 50. But teams also have a vertical board. I mean, a horizontal board on draft day. So why don't you, if you don't mind, like explain how you understand a vertical versus a horizontal board on draft day?
So horizontal board, we should be doing. And I should have done a horizontal board too, because that's the way that like you said, teams do it, and that is you have clusters of players that you have ranked similarly, because when we talk about teams saying they go BPA, no team truly goes best player available. Except the time, when some teams do crazy shit and, draft a kicker in the second round or whatever, like the Bucks did. But it is a way, if you have a horizontal board, to be able to pick a position of need for teams where they have a bunch of options that have similar grades. And it's an easier way of being able to have a lot of players at different positions stack up. Like we talked about in the beginning, right? It's very difficult to stack vertically with different positions. And a horizontal board just makes it easier to do. And so that is essentially my understanding of horizontal boards. It just makes things very much easier when it comes to your turn to pick. You can go ahead and pick players that can fit your position of need.
We have one last question here from DK for you at KSI. And it's about Xavier Thomas.
Xavier Thomas. So part of that Clemson defense that, I like Xavier Thomas. The way that I saw him is more of like a DPR, like a designated pass rusher. There was a player last year from Louisville that I really, really liked. He went in the
Yes.
fourth round to the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yahya Diaby or Yasir Abdullah. Which one was it?
Yasir Abdullah.
Yeah.
I really, really liked him. And I think that Xavier Thomas is a very, very similar type player. Thomas is pretty compact. I don't remember how tall he is. Probably like 6'1", 6'2", something like that. About 240, 250 pounds. And guy is explosive off the edge. He's your traditional first step bend as a pass rusher. He's not good against the run. I don't know if he was interested in playing the run, but he had some major issues getting washed out by tight ends, let alone offensive tackles. But he's somebody that I think could provide juice as that third or fourth edge rusher. 6'2", 245. Yeah, there you go. So I think that as when you get to players who fill a particular niche as opposed to being complete players, those are the types of players that I think you'll find like early day 3, which is where I kind of graded him. And so that's kind of like my short sort of thing with him. I think upside is there, but I think he just has to round out into becoming a little bit more of a complete player for me to want him in day 2. I guess somebody else says Brendan Rice. I think he's just a little too slow for me. I think he plays a little too slow for me. But I could see him going in the 4th or 5th round. I think that's just a feature of just this wide receiver class just being so damn good that I think it's not so much an insult to Brendan Rice, but more so there's just too many good players in the top 100, I think.
Yeah,
that was awesome.
Yeah, that was a fun episode.
Yeah, that's for the hardcore. That's for we knew this was going to be for our hardcore viewers who are like hardcore into the prospects, and it's a good way to think about it.
It's nice to jump into like not just the top 10. There's only so much we can talk about Drake May and Malik Neighbors.
Yeah, and I felt like we could have talked about so many more prospects.
Yeah,
and like we only just scratched the surface. There's a lot to talk about. This guy's a great class.
Right, it is, and I think it just sort of reinforces the point that Monty and I have been making. Like since we've been doing our position reviews, like every week we're like this is adding up. There's really good prospects in this class up and down. This is going to be a deep class. The top 100 is going to be full of playmakers, starters, impact players, and we were banging the table like trade Barkley, trade whoever, like get picks, and it worked out a little with the Leonard Williams trade. Unfortunately, they didn't trade Barkley, and they lost him. They're not going to get anything back from him. But like I said, I think Joe Schoen is sending signals that he's committed to the rebuild. Finally.
Yep.
And if he truly is, I would expect him to start using that day 2 pick. I don't think we're picking at 47. So that's my theory. I think it's either being packaged in a trade to get a quarterback, or if they get a quarterback or a receiver at 6, I think they're going to package it downward and pick up extra day 2 and day 3 picks. And I feel like Joe Schoen understands like this class, you want to take some swings here. So I think a lot of these guys that we talked about, even the guys on the back end of the top 100 are guys that are in play for the Giants as impact players, and this is a chance to build up your roster. So it's a nice bow on top of everything we've been doing and everything you've been doing to like talk about these prospects. So we appreciate you being here.
It's so much fun.
Thank you
Yeah.
to everybody who joined us. Reminder for those who are still here: next week we have a special episode with our guest Matt Waldman, who is fantastic at prospect reviews. He only reviews wide receivers, quarterbacks, tight ends, and running backs. He is the best in the business when it comes to objective evaluation of prospects. So he agreed to come on our show. So next week at this time, 9:30 on Thursday, we're going to do Matt Waldman with you guys, live show. Matt's been gracious enough to join us, on it. And for those who haven't purchased it, take a look at the Matt Waldman RSP. You go to mattwaldman.com and check that out also. And it's a monstrous guide you can download. I think it's about $21 or something like that. But it's for the hardcore fans, which I think all of you guys are at this point. We have a few more things planned as we head towards draft season. So next week is Waldman. Then our final weekly episode before the damn draft. So the marathon comes to an end. And we're going to have some more stuff planned, but I will leave it at that. KSI, do you have any closing thoughts for our followers here?
This community is awesome. I recognize everybody in the chat. You guys are all great. And the draft can't get here soon enough.
Seriously, guys, if you don't already follow KSI at KSIXI on Twitter, always full of knowledge, both college football draft and obviously NFL. He has a busy day job, but he still figures it out. So we appreciate that. And then obviously, Monte, you have any closing thoughts here?
No, man, it's going to be a fun, last 3 weeks here to the draft. So I'm looking forward to, getting through these episodes and getting to the draft with all you guys.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, man. So again, thank you guys. Follow us at He's a Giant Pod. Follow me at Queens_guy. Follow Monte at Monte Cristo at MONTECRI5TO. Follow KSIXI at KSIXI. Thank you guys. We will see you next week with Matt Waldman. Have a great week.
Salute.
Go Giants.
Go Giants.